In this troubled and extraordinarily stupid age, we can always count on two things come summertime. One is that we'll be told by the media and various hectoring voices on the internet that global warming is to blame for the high temperatures and thousands across the world are dying because of it. And the other is that those same people in the media and those same hectoring voices will insist that although we are all allegedly boiling to death, we must not use air conditioning because air conditioning is evil. Why is it evil? Well, the fun thing is to find out what reasons they'll give at any given time. All they know to begin with is that air conditioning exists and it was invented by a white person and it makes people happy and it makes life more enjoyable, and so it must be bad. The writer Eric Dean Wilson is one of the latest to take a stab at explaining why air conditioning is a form of sorcery. He wrote a whole book on the subject, actually published in July, titled After Cooling on Freon Global Warming and the Terrible Cost of Comfort. Now, I can't tell you exactly what the book says because I'd rather be decapitated by a butter knife than read it, but I did skim a Seattle Times interview with the author, and the first question in that interview, I'm not making this up, the first question is, how was the public sold on the idea that feeling comfortable was okay? Yeah, how dare the public feel comfortable, especially without asking Eric Dean Wilson first? Well, Wilson explains that comfort is a capitalist conspiracy, and then he goes on to talk about how air conditioning has increased racial inequality and has become, and I quote, a pretty insidious tool for racial segregation. It's also destroying the planet and causing temperatures to rise, he insists. Now, here I am, stupid enough to think that the giant ball of gas in the sky, burning at 27 million degrees and exerting enough gravitational force to influence objects floating in space 12 trillion miles away, is really the driver of temperature and climate on our puny planet, but I'm wrong again. Your HVAC unit is really responsible. So air conditioning is racist, and it's killing the planet. It's also sexist, we've been told. The writer Taylor Lorenz has described air conditioning as unhealthy, bad, miserable, and sexist. Many other female writers have joined the chorus explaining that air conditioning is a misogynistic plot, basically, because women tend to feel cold, and AC units in offices are often set at temperatures that are uncomfortable for the fairer sex. Now, that may be generally true, but look, sorry, ladies, you need to suck it up on this one, because if you're cold, here's the way this breaks down. If you're cold, you can always put on a sweater. If I'm hot, I can only take off so many items of clothing before you start calling the police. So this is why the warmest person in the home or in the office gets to decide where the AC is set. Those are the rules. I didn't make them up. Well, I did make them up, but even so, they are the rules. But we aren't done yet. A recent viral video brings us back to the racist element of air conditioning, and let's hear how they make the case. Here it is.
So many reasons I can think of off the top of my head why Americans are addicted to air conditioning.
So many reasons, but the most infuriating one is that our buildings are built wrong. In a great stitch, Desiree Stevens talked about how it was because of white supremacy and colonialism. Indigenous people had air conditioning through streams of water built underneath the ground, or in ways that worked with the natural landscape, such as building in the shade. And there are so many more examples from what we call vernacular architecture. For example, wind catchers from Iran. A famously hot place, these were incredibly effective cooling systems. These traditional Malay houses are designed to be porous that allow for cross-ventilation. Here's another self-ventilating house from southern Turkey. So if the colonizers had not killed everybody and learned how they could naturally cool their buildings, we might not need air conditioning. So when y'all are like, oh, it doesn't matter, the field of architecture is based in white supremacy, it's still like great design. It's bad design because we have to burn oil to not get heat stroke to live in these stupid buildings because you won't respect vernacular architecture.
Okay, so let me interject a few things here. First, why are Americans addicted to air conditioning? Well, because it's great. It's wonderful. It is one of the objectively good, superior things about modern society. It is one modern invention that actually has no downside. The only downside to air conditioning is if you don't have it. And if you don't, I don't know what to say. You got to go get yourself some of this because it's magical. You're missing out. As for the supposedly superior forms of primitive air conditioning, yeah, before air conditioning, people in the hotter areas of the world would sometimes live under cliffs or in caves. The lady in the video laments that we're no longer cave dwellers, even though there are still plenty of uninhabited caves in the world, and she's more than free to take up residence in any one of them, where she can experience the pure, more organic form of cooling, along with the pure, organic bats and spiders and snakes, who will all be her roommates, I'm sure. But do you know what people mainly did before air conditioning? They suffered and they sweat. and they smelled terrible, one can assume. And they died of heat stroke, a lot. It's true that domiciles of all types were built back in those days to accommodate the heat as best they could, whereas homes today are not built to accommodate the heat because the assumption is that we'll all have air conditioning like civilized people. But emphasis is on the phrase as best they could. It was still very hot and uncomfortable and gross and smelly. Anyone who's spent time in the warmer parts of the world where air conditioning is still scarce can attest to that fact. But what we really see with this kind of thing is how white supremacy is so often recommended by the people who are trying to condemn it. Now, I don't believe that white supremacy gave us air conditioning. I believe that credit goes to a guy named Willis Carrier in Pittsburgh in 1902. But if white supremacy did give us air conditioning, well, then I guess that's at least one good thing about white supremacy. Thank you, white supremacy, for that one, I guess. See, the ironic consequence of tying everything back to white supremacy is that you end up making it sound like not such a bad thing after all. The left now will blame white supremacy for everything from air conditioning to, if you recall that graphic on the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History website a while back, they also blame it for hard work, objectivity, rational thinking. This is all white supremacy. So does that mean that it's white supremacy which enables us to sit in a cool living room on a summer day and have an interesting, rational conversation with our friends? That's not my claim, but it would seem to be the claim of the very people who imagine themselves to be battling against white supremacy. It's an interesting combat strategy, isn't it? White supremacy is evil and it's everywhere, and it's also the reason why your home is comfortable and you aren't dying of heat stroke. Isn't this bad? I mean, are you sure it's evil then? Sounds kind of nice by your telling. The other problem, of course, is the familiar one that the people complaining about modern conveniences like air conditioning, not just complaining about them, but labeling them wicked and racist and deadly, most certainly do not forego those conveniences themselves. I could actually somewhat respect someone who thinks that AC is a Nazi conspiracy if they lived by those convictions and chose to roast in the summertime or go live in a vernacular mud hut under a cliff or in a hole underground or something. I can almost respect any principle, maybe not agree with it, but respect it to some degree, if the person professing it also endeavors to live according to it. But the people who allegedly hate all of the technology bequeathed to them by Western civilization never choose to forfeit any of it. They enjoy the luxury and comfort these things provide to them while whining about how evil and terrible all of it is. This is a far-reaching problem, actually, in our society. It's not just on the left. Very few people really make any attempt to live according to their professed value systems, which means that everybody is arguing with each other and defending worldviews that they don't really subscribe to, and whose implications they don't understand because they have never tried to put it into practice. This is not just a problem with air conditioning critics, but they are certainly among the most egregious examples. And for that reason, I can declare from my cool climate-controlled studio that they are all today canceled. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.